Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be giving you another tropical update for both of those storms out in the Atlantic. We have one that could potentially become our third tropical storm of the season out in the Gulf of Mexico, and then we have post-tropical storm Bill, which is all the way up there near Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador, and we're going to be talking about that towards the beginning part of today's video as well. And we're just going to be giving you a general update on everything to do with the tropics and just getting you ready for the next week, because we do have potentially another landfall with a tropical storm into parts of the southeast. So we're going to have all the information on that and more in today's video, so make sure you are staying tuned all the way until the end. Here's what the current National Weather Service page looks like. As you can see, we have some excessive heat warnings in effect for parts of California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and a little bit of Colorado. And then we have some red flag warnings for fire danger in parts of Utah and Montana as well. We have heat advisories in the orange, which covers much of the Southwest in general. And then we have a few more heat advisories out in South Dakota and Nebraska. We have some air quality alerts scattered throughout parts of the Central Plains and the Southern Plains, and then we have a few flood advisories in extreme southern Florida. Yesterday we had a high temperature of 124 degrees in Death Valley, California, and we had a low temperature of 28 degrees in Peter Sinks, Utah. So they did actually have some rather chilly temperatures up in that area, but that is because it is well up there in elevation. And yesterday we also had the highest precipitation or rainfall report was in Marco Island, Florida, where they got 3.55 inches of rainfall. No snowfall reports yesterday. So here's the 2-day outlook from the National Hurricane Center, and as you can see, we have a 70% chance of development within the next 2 days or the next 48 hours. And as you can see, that storm is currently located just 3 miles to the north of Mexico, so it's barely offshore right now, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that storm in just a little bit. Here is the 5-day graphical outlook. You can see that they have no mention of Bill, although it is still strangling out here in parts of the northern Atlantic near Nova Scotia, and that's going to be making its way to the northeast. It currently is a post-tropical cyclone, and you can see that we have a 90% chance over the next 5 days of development, especially throughout the western Gulf of Mexico, with potential tropical storm Claudette if that were to actually become a tropical storm. So post-tropical storm Bill is currently located at 42.5 degrees north by 57.9 degrees west. Max winds are around 45 knots or 52 miles per hour. Minimum pressure of 1,002 millibars and a radius of circulation around 40 nautical miles, which is actually a rather small system. It's about 307 miles offshore of St. Pierre, Newfoundland and Labrador in Canada, and it's about 322 miles offshore of Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada right now. And just to give you a little bit of perspective of how close it is to parts of the eastern Atlantic, it's 1,406 miles offshore of the Azores, which is just off the coast of Europe and Africa as well. So we are fairly far away from Europe and Africa and the Eastern Pacific in general, or the Eastern Atlantic in general, although it will be making its way slowly towards those areas into parts of northern and western Europe over the next couple of days. So here's the satellite imagery, and you can see it's mainly just a cluster of storms. You have actually a bigger storm, which is up here. So we have another low pressure up here, and then your tropical storm is the one that's right in here. So we have two different systems. This is a fairly disorganized mess of storms in parts of southeastern Canada and just south of Canada as well. So really nothing too organized right here. It's going into an environment with a lot of wind shear, and it's probably going to be a fairly weak system even as it's heading into the northern Atlantic and as it's making its way closer to Europe. If we look at the model guidance, you can see that most of these models have this going to the northeast, just south of Newfoundland, and then it should kind of make a little bit more of an eastward trek all the way until it hits parts of Western Europe. Then we have a little bit more confusion on whether this is going to spin off to the south, or maybe this just continues to head off further to the east, or it could be kind of a combination of both of those. So we don't know exactly where this will make landfall with Europe or Africa, but it does look like either way it's going to be a fairly weak system, and the main threat would just be rain out of this, and it wouldn't even be a lot of rain in the first place. So it doesn't look like either way. It doesn't really matter where it makes landfall, just because it's going to be a fairly and very weak system by the time it heads into that region. If we look at the GFS ensemble model guidance, you can see they're taking more of that eastward trek where it makes the northward turn, and then it continues to head further to the east into parts of the United Kingdom, and then maybe even making impact with France, or potentially if it went a little bit further south into parts of Spain. So we'll have to see. Again, there are still some models disagreeing with that. If we look at the European ensemble model guidance, it is actually fairly similar to what the GFS ensemble model guidance is showing as of right now. And if we look at the intensity guidance, you can see that it is expected to drop off from tropical storm force winds down to near tropical depression force winds. And then we have a little bit of an issue. We don't know whether this will maybe re-strengthen. The only way I can see it re-strengthening is if it makes that sharp turn and curve to the south near the Azores, and then maybe kind of reorganizes itself south of there. Otherwise, I think it'll probably just drop off into a tropical depression status storm with not too much going for it. If we look at the next system, Invest 92L, which could potentially become Tropical Storm Claudette if it were to be named, it's located at 18.2 degrees north by 94.4 degrees west, and you can see it's basically right on shore of Mexico there. Currently has maximum winds of 20 knots, which is equivalent to 23 miles per hour, and it's gusting to 30 knots, which would be around 33 or 34 miles per hour. Minimum pressure of about 1,009 millibars with a radius of circulation around 150 nautical miles. So I accidentally put an extra zero there, so it's 150 nautical miles there. So it's a rather big storm. It's not huge, but it will, as it makes that turn back into the Gulf of Mexico, it will continue to get larger and larger. It's currently located just 3 miles offshore of Allende, Mexico, which is right there. Right here is where Allende is. So it's basically right on shore right now, practically making landfall right now. But again, it is a weak storm. It's mainly just causing some thunderstorms and showers in that area. It's 131 miles south-southeast, I should have said, of Veracruz, Mexico, and then it's 853 miles south of New Orleans, Louisiana. So it is fairly far south in the Gulf of Mexico, and it will eventually be making that turn further to the north and northeast over the next few days, and that's when we could be talking about a few more impacts in terms of its intensification and also potentially making landfall with the United States. So looking at what the current satellite imagery looks like, you can see that we have it located right on shore of Mexico right here. It is fairly disorganized, and what we want to pay attention to mostly is all of this thunderstorm activity up into the central and eastern Gulf of Mexico. This could potentially offset this system, and if we have too much thunderstorm activity throughout that area, we could potentially see this storm break up as it heads into that area. So potentially, if this storm maybe makes a little bit more of a westward track, we could avoid those storms. We could avoid that wind shear. But either way, it looks like it will weaken somewhere as it heads closer to the central Gulf of Mexico, and then as it heads further north of there, it might re-intensify and it might grow once again. So those thunderstorms out to the west of Cuba are going to be posing a threat to the storm's development. It will be tricky for the storm to navigate through, and that's one of the reasons that the model intensity guidance has actually lowered its strength over the past 24 hours. It's just because of all that wind shear, which is further to the north. We are expecting a little bit more wind shear now, but I am going to be talking about that a little bit more later on in today's video, and we're going to discuss the multiple different ways that this could actually play out. So looking at what the current model guidance looks like, we only have a couple models running on this storm right now. So you can see it right now. It's a fairly broad picture with some of these storms. You can see that some of them have them completely on land. Some of them have them all the way going into central Florida. Most of the models that I have seen have been taking it pretty much with this track, with that red line or that gray line there. So it doesn't look like the medium green line or that light green line on either side there is going to be actually correct or accurate. It looks like probably somewhere within this bullseye zone is going to be where we make landfall with this event. Giving you another idea, here's the GFS ensemble models, and you can see that most of them, each line is a different member of the GFS ensemble models, but you can see that most of them have it making landfall somewhere in between Louisiana, Mississippi, and maybe even into Alabama or the westernmost panhandle of Florida. And right now we're looking at potentially the heaviest rainfall somewhere within here. But again, we're going to be tracking this and we're going to be discussing this more over the next couple of days, because of course we could still see some updates with the track. Here's the intensity guidance, and it will be borderline, so you can see it is expected to gradually intensify and then maybe get up to tropical storm status. This is going to be really tricky because we're going to be hovering right between about 30 and 40 knots, so it's going to be right in between there, right in between the required required wind speed there. So we will be close to tropical storm force winds either way, whether we're on the upper end of there or the lower end, and we're still trying to figure out how much of an impact the storms in the eastern Gulf of Mexico and the central Gulf of Mexico will have on this event, and also how intense the wind shear will be, and whether we can actually get the trough to pull away further to the east and actually make southwesterly wind flows through the Gulf of Mexico. If that can happen, then we can get the storm to really intensify, maybe into a moderate or high-end tropical storm. But right now it looks like it's going to be either a weak tropical storm or a high-end tropical depression. If we look at the water temperatures, these will be one of the favorable aspects of this. So you can see in the Gulf of Mexico, for example, we have water temperatures that are around a degree or two above normal, and that would be in Celsius. So we're about a degree or two above normal, which is fairly decent for this time of year. And in the warmer pattern that we're expected to go into, that might even increase a little bit more. We might be closer to 2 degrees above normal by the end of this month. If you look at the actual sea surface temperatures and the recorded temperatures, you can see that we're right around that 25 to 28 degree Celsius mark, which would be around 85 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're actually fairly high up there, maybe even approaching 90 degree Fahrenheit temperatures in some of these spots. So that's fairly high up there, and that is definitely enough to spawn up a fairly decent tropical storm, or even those water temperatures could even carry a low end category 1, but other factors will probably mitigate it from getting that strong. If we look at the ocean heat content, that is really non-existent right now. We don't have much OHC in the Gulf of Mexico right now. It's mostly centered over the Caribbean and areas south of there. So if we do get a storm to move through there, we could have some trouble. But right now in the Gulf of Mexico, not a lot of OHC to deal with. So that should prevent this from strengthening too much. And if we look at the wind shear as well, these numbers are going to be fairly high. So you can see this storm by this point in the model run. So this is around Friday, or actually tomorrow, late in the evening into Friday morning. You can see that the storm is expected to be somewhere in there, and then we have your area of high wind shear up further to the north into the southeast and into the northern Gulf of Mexico, and these are fairly strong. These are fairly high values of wind shear. You're seeing wind shear coming out of the west and moving to the east, so that could cause some issues, especially because this storm is moving north to south. Meanwhile, the winds are moving west to east, so you're going to be seeing a little bit of issues there, especially in the upper levels of the atmosphere with this storm developing. And if we look at the relative humidity as well, you can see that we have a lot of dry air pushing in on the southern and western end of this, and then on the eastern and potentially the central and northern end of the storm as well. We have some of that upwelling of more moist air and also more humid air. So we do have a little bit of a clash of some drier air out near Texas, northern Louisiana into Arkansas. So even parts of eastern Louisiana in that kind of humid zone, and then the other side of Louisiana potentially getting into some really dry conditions that could disrupt the storm developing. Although we do have a rather solid stream of moisture coming out of Mexico and moving all the way into the southeast. So that might be one of the positives. It's going to be an east-oriented system, meaning that the bulk of the storm's precipitation will be on the eastern end of there. Now, exactly where that actually ends up is still something that we need to pay attention to. Like I said yesterday, I predicted that these numbers from the European ensemble model would probably go up. Yesterday, they were only showing about a 30% chance of a tropical storm developing, and now we're up near 60 to 65% chance. Especially the highest chances would be over southern and western Louisiana. I think believe this area will probably move further to the east, especially based on the model guidance coming out of the GEFS, which is coming out, which has shifted this further to the east. So I think we're probably going to see most of the models shifted closer to eastern Louisiana, into Mississippi, Alabama as well. So probably a little bit of a shift in the models. And if we look at the expected rainfall totals, we will have a little stripe, probably about 25 miles wide, where we get the heaviest rainfall on the order of about 6 to 10 inches or even more in these areas. And then the surrounding areas will probably be around 2 to 5 inches, 2 to 6 inches of rainfall. But again, it is going to be in a single zone, a very small zone, but definitely a very impactful zone of heavy rainfall. Now, this would probably be one of the worst case scenario events out of all the models, because if you look at the area where that thin area where we're dealing with 10 or more inches of rainfall in that pink or purple color, that's going right over New Orleans. So we're going to hope that this shifts a little bit further east and also a little bit further southeast, so that most of that heavy rainfall actually goes offshore, because we really don't want all that rainfall going onshore, because that could definitely cause some flooding issues. And also, if we're looking at the waves, the wave heights, you can see that especially on the eastern side of this, we will be dealing with wave heights that are going to be closer to 10 to even 12 feet in some of those areas. Offshore, they'll be much higher, closer to 20 or 30 feet. But as you're getting closer to the coast, they will be a little bit on the lower end of things. So they'll be a bit between about 6 to 10 feet in height as you get to parts of the coastal areas of Louisiana or Mississippi, closer to the coastal areas of Alabama or the Panhandle of Florida. They'll be a little bit higher, maybe closer to 10 feet in some of those areas. So we will have a strong southerly wind coming onshore that could cause some waves to develop. That northwesterly wind will help push back the waves if you live on the western end of the system, however. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.